Hello, I'm Pastor Harry Zanting from the First Christian Reformed Church in Red Deer, Alberta. In my church, we are doing a Lenten series entitled The Laments of Lent, where we are looking at some of the Psalms. Most are songs of lament connected to the Easter story. Now, a number of them are quoted or alluded to by Jesus when he is hanging on the cross. So I thought, perhaps alongside of or a companion to those messages, something on YouTube, which you're watching right now, reflecting on the 7 words or statements of Jesus from the cross. You see, Jesus knew the Psalms. They were deeply ingrained, deeply rooted and embedded in his life. So much so that in this time of crisis, when he's hanging there, he uses them. He prays them. Now, Eugene Peterson, in a course on Jesus in prayer, considers Jesus' words from the cross as prayers. Not just statements, not instructions, but prayers. Well, that gave me a whole new slant on those words because I never really thought of them in that way. Jesus is praying to God the Father. And there are 7 prayers or words from the cross, and they fit nicely with the 7 weeks of Lent. Now, the first of them we are considering, and the only one in the Gospel of Matthew, is also perhaps the most agonizing, excruciating, forlorn in its expression. My God, why have you forsaken me? It's a cry of pain and abandonment. And I think it makes it just worse when it's someone you never thought would do that, someone you counted on. And he counted on God. Now, when you think about that, that's a very human cry, isn't it? Perhaps you've cried it or prayed something along this line. I know I have. You wonder where God is. You feel like he's nowhere near. Life is dark. Now, for Jesus, in our passage, the verse just before speaks of 3 hours of darkness. From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. And in that moment, Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? He has been suffering. He's been mocked. He's been beaten. He's been crucified. He's experienced the shame of that torture, and he is about to die. Now, the prayer is actually a quote from Psalm 22. It's how the psalm begins. And when you read through, and I invite you to read Psalm 22, when you read through it, you'll find that psalm is everywhere present in Matthew 27. The psalm talks about being scorned and insulted, that they shake their heads in mockery, and you find the same thing in Matthew. The psalm talks about how he trusts in the Lord, so let the Lord deliver him. Well, that same thing is said in the Gospel of Matthew. The psalm talks about dividing his clothes and casting lots for his garments. Well, Matthew mentions that too. And then there's our quote that we have, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now, I believe that Jesus knew not just the first line of the psalm, but the whole psalm. Most of that psalm is a lament, but the end changes its tone. It's about praise. It's about the poor being satisfied. It's about them being filled, that they will be rescued, and that God will do it. It ends with hope and promise and joy. Now, immediately following Jesus' prayer, it seems some may have misheard him. Verse 47 of Matthew 27 says, when some of those standing there heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. Now, in Aramaic, Jesus cries out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. And I think Eloi could sound a little bit like Elijah, right? And yet Matthew includes that mistaken detail, and I believe it's on purpose, because it's pointing to the answer to the question of Jesus in the prayer about being forsaken. Jewish people who knew their Old Testament, who knew their Bible, knew the prophecy from the book of Malachi 4, verse 5. And there it talks about Elijah, right? Elijah who never actually died, right? He was taken up into heaven in a chariot. But they believed that he would come back, and that would signal the day of the Lord. That would signal the day when the Messiah would come to save them. Now you get where I'm going, right? That detail about Elijah is kept because it's about the Messiah coming to save them. Now I think those who are listening got it a bit wrong. It says, now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. Actually, Elijah was not going to save anyone. He was going to prepare the way for the Messiah to come and save them, or even us. And that is what Jesus does, isn't it? So, Jesus, in praying this prayer, is not praying a prayer of anger or resignation or even request, wanting to know the answer, right? He knows the answer. He knows why God has forsaken him. It's in the end of the psalm, right? It's to rescue God's people. It's in the words about Elijah from those standing nearby, although they're probably speaking in mockery, but it's there. Listen, haven't you ever prayed something like this and known the answer, right? You pray it anyways. I know why, but why does it have to be this way, right? Well, Jesus was human. He is suffering, and he asks it anyway. And I think at the same time, it's a recognition of what he must do, even a submission to it. I know why. It is to save God's people, to rescue them. And even if Jesus knew the answer, or we know the answer, I like it that Jesus prays this because it's okay to pray this, to bring it to God. God will hear it. Jesus prays it, and I think God welcomes it. My God, why? Why this suffering? We can ask that. Anyway, so take some time to reflect on this prayer. Maybe it is your own or has been, but see in it also the answer for good, for hope, for salvation. There is God who answers with love and life. And isn't that what the whole Easter story is about? Well, thanks for listening. Keep praying. And may your Lenten reflections bear much fruit.